Okay, section 37, the man with leprosy healed, and section 38, the palsied man healed. We've got two questions in the first section, so we can go through that. We have question number 217 is based on Matthew 8:4. And Jesus saith unto him, See thou tell no man, but go thy way, show thyself to the priest, and offer the gift that Moses commanded for a testimony unto them. And so the question is, what did Jesus tell the leper to do after he was healed? And it is B, to fulfill the law and present himself to the priest. This is a good time to take notice that there are some things that are maybe going to escape us because we're not familiar with the customs and cultures of the times. When it comes to interpreting Scripture, we follow what's called a grammatical historical, where you look at the actual grammar with what's actually said, and you put things together. You follow the logic as it was presented, not what you would like to imagine it to mean, as in the allegorical method. So the grammatical historical, first of all, looks at the text itself, how it's structured, and then it looks at the historical context. Most specifically, it's talking, when you say grammatical historical, the historical aspect is looking at words at how they were used in the day that they were spoken. One of the problems, one of the fallacies, the modern fallacies that we recognize is trying to take our definitions, our modern definitions, and use them to define the words that we read in the Bible. You say, well, aren't we supposed to do that? Well, yeah, no. When you check the dictionary, dictionaries in different time periods would define words as they were used in those times. Didn't they have a thing in the debates recently where they redefined something overnight? It was Merriam-Webster all of a sudden on the websites. Amy Coney Barrett, she used a phrase, preference, okay?
Orientation.
Yeah, and all of a sudden they wanted to use a modern definition to say that what she said was offensive. And they changed the dictionary definition like overnight. And Coney Barrett was using the definition of the word as it was used in the time when it was used. So, preference over sexual orientation, that's exactly what it was.
The reason why the justice who used that word, because he's an originalist, he said,
yes,
interprets law according to its text, and
right.
according to the meaning that the people of the time understood it.
This would be the grammatical historical method, yes. Yeah, in the time it was used.
Title 10 of the Constitution, like
I don't.
civil rights, quote.
It might have been over Title 10 issues. I can't remember what it was she was replying to or responding to, but the whole point is this: that when you go to take words in the and phrases and explanations in the Bible, you need to know a little bit about the historical times that they were in. And this one is a little bit more obvious. Moses was, when it talks about Moses, it was commanded in the law that when you had a leper that was healed, he was supposed to then present himself to the priest and then give an offering. And the priest was to examine him, and there were specific things they were supposed to do in the examination, and in order to declare that he was clean from leprosy. Let's put a microphone on Miss Wilma.
Many of these phrases you can't take out of context and still know the meaning. You have to take the whole context, see what the meaning is.
Exactly, exactly. Okay. Brother Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, like, one of the words that would be very key to that is the word replenish. Replenish used to just mean fill, so that when God created, he wanted Adam and Eve to replenish the earth, and after the Noahic flood, he wanted Noah and his families to replenish the earth, but that was to fill the earth, not refill. Today, we would use replenish as is in the sense of refilling something, like something that has run out, we have to fill it again. But in the original meaning, years ago, when the Bible was translated and published, it meant just fill. And that's why some people's theology is wrong, because they think that the earth is being refilled,
Yeah.
originally. So,
Yeah.
and that, like there's the ruin reconstruction theory that, that between Genesis 1 and 2, there was some kind of pre-Adamic race, and that therefore Adam and Eve would be refilling the earth. But that only makes sense if you don't take the word in its original context.
Right, yeah. And that would be in the context as it was translated, but then you got to go back to the Hebrew and say, well, then how was it being used in that time? Yeah, interpretation's it's a very real science. It's called hermeneutics. The science of interpretation is exactly what it is. Now remember that's the grammatical historical method, and that's easy to follow if you don't forget the word grammatical. But an alternate view, the major alternate view for interpreting the scripture is called the allegorical method. In the allegorical method, you don't go by what's actually said or what was meant to be said. You go by what it reminds you of or what it makes you think of. And so it's like, well, such and such happened. Well, this sort of makes me think of another thing, and so launch off in a completely new direction there. So you've got to be careful with that. That's how you come up with doctrines concerning Mary, because Mary was the mother of Jesus. Well, that makes her all of a sudden the mother of all believers, because they get saved through the Catholic Church, because she's the mother of the church. And how do you get that? Well, the word mother reminds me of motherhood. And therefore, I can say whatever I want about motherhood. Okay, so that's the difference between the two methods of interpretation there. Okay, look at C. Going home to have a party and celebrate would have been probably the most natural reaction for the leper to have. And so Jesus wanted to say, yeah, you should go home and celebrate. Hey, I want to come to the party afterwards. Now, even though celebration is a form of showing worship and thankfulness, it's at least slightly self-centered. Okay, our first reaction to receiving a blessing from anyone should be to say thank you. But here Jesus called upon the leper to turn to God to express his gratitude. And so the C would be really insufficient by itself. By telling him to go to the priest to present himself, he was actually accomplishing two things. The first was to have him go to the place of worship and have proper worship. And of course, the second was to maintain his responsibility before the law. And the law required that if you got healed, you're supposed to present yourself to the priest. So, Jesus, again, we see, did not come to destroy the system that he himself had set up in the law when he inspired the scriptures, 1,500 years earlier. Jesus came to do the law right, if anything. Now, A highlights the fact that science does not have all the answers. He didn't say go and get a second medical opinion. Science does not have all the answers. In fact, really, Jesus never did say anything about science and its use. I thought of a couple of scriptures where it could be said there was some kind of scientific reasoning that was being used. Like, for instance, when you say there's a red sky in the morning, then you think that there's going to be a bad day and so on and so forth. And we have that come down to us with sailors and their quaint little sayings. Red sky at night, sailors delight. Red sky in the morning, sailor take warning. And there's some science behind that. But Jesus didn't talk to people about how to use science or how to ignore science. Okay, Jesus' focus was on man's relationship to God, and so he had an awful lot to say about that. If anything, the Bible condemns science that is falsely called science. Can anybody, I'll give you the passage in a moment, can anybody remember in the New Testament where it refers to that? Brother Joe Done?
I can narrow it down to two books.
Go ahead.
I can't remember. I think it's First Timothy.
Okay, it is 1 Timothy chapter 6. He says, O Timothy, keep that which is committed to thy trust, avoiding profane and vain babblings, and oppositions of science, falsely so called. You have science that is falsely called science that stands in opposition, and it's good as vain babblings. There are two words so I can help you identify with: climate change. Okay? It is falsely called science. They said 97% of the people who agree that climate change is caused by man happen to agree that climate change is caused by man. That's exactly how that works out. They got a bunch of scientists who all believed that climate change was caused by man. They took a poll of them, and they all agreed. They were surprised to find out that they all agreed that they agreed with each other. And it presents opposition, and it is vain babblings. It is vain babblings. Okay. Okay, just because there's some effect that all things have in the world doesn't mean that that we're going to die in 10 years, or I think it's 10 years now. I think it's supposed to be 12 years. AOC was supposed to be 12 years, and so 2 years have passed. Well, guess what? It's going to all miraculously disappear, I suppose, is a problem. And we'll, never mind. I won't go any further than that.
I'll just throw my 2 cents in on this. As I was telling one of my students who was making a claim about that, I said, okay, when all the people clamoring about global warming, and, well, they changed it from global warming to climate change, so that's already a first clue that, you know, because when the weather's really cold, they can't really call it global warming, but they can blame it on climate change.
10 inches of global warming.
Yes, and you get out your shovel.
Yeah.
Okay, but anyway, I said, okay, when all the people, you know, all these politicians and all these celebrities and all these scientists stop traveling around the world in their private jets, creating all this carbon footprint, when they decide to downsize their homes from 65-room mansions that require a larger footprint than you, me, and the rest of the class combined. In other words, when they start to believe what they're saying, that's when I'll start to believe what they're saying.
And when they stop building their houses and buying their houses on the shore.
Yes, that's right. That was another thing I said. They keep buying up shore property, and I was just like, well, somebody's lying.
Amen. Let's bring the mic over to Mohan.
They need to start practicing what they preach. And another thing, if they shut their mouths, we can cut carbon emissions 100%.
That's right. That's right, because that's where a lot of carbon dioxide is coming from. Let's bring over to Wilma after Joe there.
Who do they blame carbon emissions on with the California fires?
Yeah, which could be, yeah, taken care of.
And who can take care of it?
Yeah. Okay. Okay, question 218 is based on Luke 5, verses 15 to 16. It says, "But so much the more went there fame abroad of him, and great multitudes came together to hear and to be healed by him of their infirmities. He withdrew himself into the wilderness and prayed." So what did Jesus do after he had been thronged by the people? It is B. He took time to meet with his Father. Of course, Jesus did not run out of power, as in C. Neither did Jesus treat ministry as a business, as in A. Look at A. He told them to come back when his office was open. No, what was important was that Jesus took time to be refreshed in his Father. Now, this is the true source of all of our strength. It's not merely that we try to find some me time or even vacation time. Vacation time certainly is important, as God has determined that we need the Sabbath rest, but merely trying to achieve a relaxation response instead of a fight or flight response is not sufficient. We need to make sure to get alone with God to prepare us for the work that is ahead. So he was not just holding office hours and dealing with things that way. Now, he took time to meet with his Father. And we need to do that every day. We really do, don't we? Everybody say amen. Amen. Okay. Any other comments before we move on to section 38? Okay, very good. The palsied man healed. Okay, the question here is, what city did Jesus adopt for his own? Matthew 9:1 says he entered into a ship and passed over, and he came into his own city. Mark 2:1 says, and again he entered into Capernaum after some days, and it was noised that he was in the house. So what city did Jesus adopt for his own? B, it is Capernaum. Okay, I'd like to point out by this question God's use of human instrumentality. Jesus made a logistical and a strategic choice. We've already pointed out before in other questions that Jerusalem presented a hostile environment at this point in the ministry of Jesus. Also, Nazareth was a little too off the beaten path. By relocating to Capernaum, Jesus was an excellent launching off point for ministering to the area around Galilee, the region of Galilee. Although we should not depend on our human wisdom and planning, we shouldn't depend upon it, that does not mean that we should do no planning at all. When you stop to look, for instance, at the missionary journeys of the Apostle Paul and the cities that he went to, they were located along Roman military highways. The Romans had built highways across the empire in order to have the rapid response teams be able to go out, the Roman military to be able to travel quickly. And so because that was a road that the Roman military would travel across, then it just made sense. As they say in business, there are three things that are important about establishing a business. Does anybody know what they are?
Location, location, and location.
Location, location, and location. Exactly. And so they did. So these became major centers, and so you would see the Apostle Paul establishing churches along those roads, along the roads of major commerce. Also, there was logistics that were involved just by God's sovereign hand in establishing the church. The timing of everything and the kingdoms coming together and the nations coming together the way they did, you stop and think, you had essentially military power and world power had been centered into the east before Rome really took over. And so you had the major centers of power in Persia or modern-day Iran. They'd love to be able to get that back again. It's not going to happen. But as they were defeated, the Western societies with a Western mentality of logic and science that took over. You had the rise of the Greek Empire and its effect on the management of world affairs by using the city-states and having local governments to be able to control their local politics. And then with their trading, you had the influence of the Greek language. So you had the universal language of Greek for the world, the Western world at that time. You had the Roman law. I mean, even in Italy, they spoke more Greek commonly for common practices than they did even Latin, because it was the language of commerce as well. Greek was the language of commerce. And then you had Roman law over the empire to keep peace. Then you also had the fact that during the 400 years of silence and during the Roman or the Jewish diaspora, you had synagogues sprinkled throughout all of the empire. So you had all these things come together for the launching of the church after Jesus' resurrection. You had a language that was common, the New Testament being written in Greek. You had the synagogues, you had the godly presence already, the biblical theology already present. You had peace in the area. You had roads to be able to travel on. Bam! It just all came together. It was no wonder that the churches were able to thrive the way they did. Okay, so when Jesus went to Capernaum, it was really more of the same thing that was happening. Jesus was there in a location that he would be able to spread out into the region of Galilee. That's something I suppose that we should be taking notice of also, is that we should make sure to do some planning. We don't depend on our wisdom as if we are going to have all the answers, but we should also be mindful. And isn't that kind of what all the churches in our time have done in this last year? Has been to adapt and respond to our circumstances. And now churches all over the place have a lot of ministries online that they didn't have before. More common churches have done that. Pastor Swakowski, he has people out in out in Europe and other places, he was telling me that tune in for services. So there's a number of things as we adapt to those things. We utilize what's there. We don't just say, well, that's something of the devil. Okay. Question 220. By the way, before I go any further, anybody have any comments or anything on something like that there? Okay. Question 220 is based on Mark 2:6. Now, by the way, you'll notice that this section on the palsied man, there are a number of differences that different details that are included from one gospel writer to the next, and it would be good to check those out and to read those in parallel. Okay, Mark chapter 2, verse 6 says, "But there were certain of the scribes sitting there and reasoning in their hearts." So, which people, actually it's based on more than that too. Verse 21, Luke 5:21, I'm going to make a note of that. Luke 5:21 says, "The scribes and the Pharisees began to reason." Okay, and okay. So which people looked like they were more ready to judge Jesus because they were front and center in the house where Jesus was meeting? The answer is A, the Pharisees and the doctors of the law. That's what the scribes were. Okay, people who are indifferent to the gospel, as in C, people who didn't have something else they had to do. Okay, well, I don't have anything else better to do. Well, guess what? I've had people say to me, "Oh, let me see, can I come to church? Yeah, I don't have anything planned for Sunday. I don't got anything better else to do." Guess what? They don't come then either. Yeah. Even though they don't have something better else to do, they don't come then. Now, they go through life with a spiritual dullness, missing the work of God being done right under their noses. Brother Joe.
Yeah, I was just going to say that if somebody has that attitude, that at that moment when they tell you, "Oh, I don't have anything better to do," if they have that attitude, they'll find something better to do.
Yeah, right. Okay. Okay, now for like B and C, both people who were sick, as in B, and the Pharisees and doctors of the law, certainly had an interest in on what Christ was doing. Okay, the doctors of the law could have been coming out of genuine interest in Jesus, but sadly, this just wasn't the case. The other most likely option would be that they were come in order to judge Christ, and those who come to Christ in order to criticize him will always be able to find something to criticize him for. Not because there is anything worth criticizing about Christ, but that never really matters. It doesn't stop people from finding fault anyway. People will invent problems and faults in their imaginations. Okay, everything depends on how you approach Jesus Christ. If you approach him looking for truth, you will find it. Lee Strobel was a journalist. A lot of us, in fact, you guys have been watching some of those videos lately. He was a journalist who did an honest investigation of the claims of Christ, and he found, just like many others who have done the same thing before him, that Jesus was who he said he was. Okay, so it all depends on a person's perspective. Okay. Somebody has said, the pessimist is somebody who sees the glass as half full. Okay, and no, wait, he says it's half empty, and the optimist sees it as a glass that's half full. An engineer sees it as, perhaps the beginning of a chemical solution for solving some world problem. Okay, an engineer sees it as having so much power going down a waterfall that it'll produce so much electricity. A doctor sees a glass half filled with water, and you can go on like that. Depends on your perspective. Miss Wilma, a microphone for her. We should bring a second microphone back there.
The average person realizes it could be filled up.
Yeah. The guy coming out of the desert, He sees an empty glass after about 2 seconds. Okay. Okay. You see something as a drink that could be given in the name of a prophet and getting a prophet's reward. Okay, question 221 is based on Luke 5:19, and when they could not find by what way they might bring him in because of the multitude, they went upon the housetop and let him down through the tiling with his couch into the midst before Jesus. And so the question is, what indicated the love and concern of the men who carried in the palsied man? It is A, they were willing to bust up the patio on top of the house to lower the man to see Jesus. They kept ranks and they didn't let that house prevail against them. Okay, so B and C are two common ways that people do respond to those who are afflicted, and there are some very important insights along this road here. By the way, I should point out, I didn't mention before, the Pharisees and the doctors, they were front and center. You know, you couldn't get into the house because of the press. And but who did manage to get into the house? Who was the first ones there to judge Christ? Okay, the Pharisees and the scribes. That should say something about the meanness of people and how they will make sure they're going to be there to ruin everything. Okay, but let's look at this question then. C, they voted to raise everyone's taxes so the government could be responsible for him. Okay, C is a reference to the collectivist response, where there's an emphasis on government being the solution to our problems. Okay, there are two, and this is something that people have to understand. We will be explaining this over time more and more. You can have people say, well, we're here for the collective good, so that what we're going to do is we're going to try to do what's best for every man, that every man gets an equal share, that no one person has any interest that is superior to any others. And so therefore, if somebody has more money than somebody else, then we have to put individual concerns aside and do what's good for the collective. And so the appeal is to say, well, we have a sick man here. Well, the collectivist, what he does is he says, we're going to take money from everybody to make sure that this sick man gets healed. Well, when the government is used to guarantee that everyone has the same benefit, then people are quick to pass, on their neighborly responsibility onto the government. They'll say, well, why should I be doing neighborly things? This is what my taxes are for. I paid my taxes. Let the government take care of this person. I don't have to anymore. This demotes people's care for their neighbors because they can pass on their responsibility to fully consider what is needed. Why do I have to think twice about this? I don't have to think about this person at all. The government will take care of them. Once it's in the government's hands, it becomes too complicated to follow. Nobody can track what the government's doing. And of course, this creates layers of management and handling that creates an accumulation of human incompetencies. So people feel free to leave it in the hands of the government so they don't have to think about it anymore. It has actually been demonstrated to reduce charitable giving and activity of those who assume the government will take care of everything. Why should I give charitably? Why should I get engaged in charity? I paid the government off to do it with my taxes. So this is a reaction that the world has. Instead of getting personally involved, pass it on and then forget about it. And whatever wasted mismanagement, I don't want to know about it. The experts, they know what they're doing. And as I said, you get an accumulation of incompetencies instead. Now look at B. Look at B. They told the man they would pray for him, but I made sure to add on this parenthetically, which they promptly forgot to do. Yeah, it's good to be able to pray for people and to offer to pray for people, but then we need to really follow through and do that. It's a reference to a different kind of uncaring attitude. Offering to pray for somebody can become a glib response. It's kind of like the polite greeting, how do you do? Wait, you're going to tell me actually how you're doing? I didn't mean it, honestly. No, when you say how do you do, we should be actually interested in what people are saying. But sometimes it comes out that I'll pray for you is just as glib and just as much a part of common civil discourse as how do you do? Although we must be careful with overcommitment, since we can't fix everything in the world. I mean, it is possible to hear people out and say, oh, here, let me take care of everything. But then what happens? You got to be careful of that, to say, oh, well, I am compassionate. I'm going to say yes to fixing all your problems for you. No, because now you're robbing the person of the opportunity to grow in responsibility, okay, and become dependent upon you as their nanny. Now, there's a balance that's got to be achieved here of doing more than just saying, oh, I'll pray for you, and then forgetting about it because you don't have to bother. They'll never know whether you prayed for them or not. And then being able to take on all the problems. You got to be careful with what we do. According to A, we need to be willing to go the extra mile sometimes to be a blessing to others if we care about them. They went up onto the rooftop because whenever you teach this passage, you always want to make sure to remind people that you've got the houses in the Middle East there were commonly built with a patio on top to be able to take advantage of any cool breezes that might be passing through. And so that's why they were able to get up to the rooftop and then break open the tiling to get down into the house. Okay. Okay, question 222. Okay, because sin was often associated with the cause of illness and other troubles, as we have seen in these other passages before also, how did Jesus show his understanding of the palsied man's greater concern? It's based on Matthew 9:2, and behold, they brought to him a man sick of the palsy, lying on the bed, and Jesus, seeing their faith, said unto the sick of the palsy, Son, be of good cheer, thy sins be forgiven thee. Okay, the answer is C. He forgave him his sins. So Jesus was recognizing the greater concern. Now, all of this is premised on the fact that in that time period, they often associated sin with sickness, that if somebody was sick, it must have been associated with their sin. And we discussed that in another question, on another session there. But keep in mind, this is the setting that Jesus was operating in. Okay, B suggests how if sin is the cause of illness, that the remedy for sin is dependent on self and our good works. So he told him to stop sinning. Okay, no, that wouldn't even fit anyhow, because it would suggest that, okay, we can take control of our lives by our own works. Okay, A highlights how the world diminishes the significance of sin and obscures the real solution for sin. The world would say to the person, oh, you know, he's not so bad. Sometimes sickness is very directly related to sinful activity. Can anybody think in our modern time of anything that is like that, Brother Mohan? Okay, it's not the one I had in mind, but yeah, sure. AIDS. Yeah. I'm sorry, AIDS, that's the one I was thinking of. Sure. You're not allowed to call it sin. Yeah. I have no trouble saying that this is a judgment from God. Back when AIDS was first becoming popularly known and understood, there were preachers who said this is a judgment from God. They came under such great fire. How can you say that about them? Because it's a sin. Oh no, that's normal. They were born that way, and you can't say anything about homosexuality. No, this is a sin. This is a sin that is. This is a problem that is, a recompense for their activity. Okay, it's tied in directly to it. It is a direct result of that. And you see, but this is how the world thinks. They want to diminish the nature of sin. They want to say, well, they have AIDS because they didn't have enough social support to be able to help them overcome things like that. Let me get Brother Mohan a microphone for him. And alcoholism, same thing. Okay, they want to call it a disease. It is not a disease. It is sin. And I will strongly dispute all those in the addiction community who would suggest that it is a disease. Okay, here's how you remedy the disease of alcoholism, so they can't go like this. Remedy, all taken care of. No, it's a fact of the world. Now, with alcoholism, it is true that some people biologically might be more sensitive and might be have a stronger biological response. Still, it's overcome by not doing it. Okay, but they want to say, it's not so bad. It's not them. They're not so bad. Yeah, they are. They're sin. They're in sin. Let me get to Mohan, and then we'll take it over to Wilma.
With that wicked sin of homosexuality, so how can a man with a man procreate? How can a woman with a woman procreate? Mm-hmm. So how can they say they're born with it?
Yeah, right. Yeah. The gene pool would diminish itself because they aren't reproducing themselves. How about Miss Wilma? Yes.
The trait for alcoholism can be inherited, but if you don't take the first drink, you can't become an alcoholic.
Right. You can't. Yeah. And I'm not going to say it's inherited as a trait. I'll say that some, by biology, might be more sensitive to alcohol. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so, he told him he wasn't really a bad person. No, he called it what it is. Sin is sin. Okay, Jesus used this opportunity to deal with people to address the man's real need. He brought this, he used their mentality, their mindset. Okay, question 223 is based on Mark 2:8, and immediately when when Jesus perceived in his spirit that they so reasoned within themselves, he said unto them, why reason ye these things in your hearts? So how did Jesus find out about the Pharisees' complaint? See, Jesus knew their heart. Sometimes we find out what people are thinking because they're vocal about their complaints, as in A. It just wasn't the case here. Other times we hear about what people are thinking because they complain behind our backs, as in B. Okay, people should, if you got a complaint, talk to somebody directly. However, Jesus knows what our deepest needs really are and what we're really thinking. And this is also why he would not commit himself to men to serve their causes. Instead of bending God's will to serve our plans, we need to discover what God's agenda is to serve him. The Pharisees were not quick to find a way to agree with Jesus, but would have preferred to see him act according to the way that they thought was appropriate. And so they brought him into judgment there. Question 224 is based on Luke 5:21, and the scribes and the Pharisees began to reason, saying, who is this which speaketh blasphemies? Who can forgive sins but God alone? So how were the Pharisees right in their reaction to forgive sin? B, yeah. Only God could forgive sins. See, they knew Jesus could heal, as in C, okay? It's not that they said he couldn't heal. They knew that he could. They'd seen him do it. They were wrong, as in A, to think that Jesus could not forgive. But however, they were right that only God can forgive sins. By recognizing this, they were actually answering their own question about Jesus and who he was. Jesus set up this manner of healing to bring the Pharisees along in their logic. If the man were healed, then they would have to recognize that Jesus was claiming to be God. So it's like he's setting them up. Kind of like he set Nicodemus up, kind of like he set the woman up at the well, setting up the woman at the well for what was to come. Jesus would always do that. He would bring these things in, and as people respond to them, he'd say, there you go. There you go. Okay, question 225, based on Mark 2:9 and 10. Whether is it easier to say to the sick of the palsy, thy sins be forgiven thee, or to say, arise and take up thy bed and walk? But that you may know that the Son of Man hath power on earth to forgive sins, he saith to the sick of the palsy, and then he commands them to rise up. Okay. So how did Jesus prove his deity according to the standards of the Pharisees? A, if sin and sickness were tied together, then if you cure the sickness, you cure the sin. You see how he's got them set up? If Jesus had healed the man with the best medical practice of the day, as in B, then the issue of sin and forgiveness would not have been addressed. Okay. If Jesus had not healed the man, but only forgave him, as in C, if he didn't have anything to show for it, then there'd be nothing for the Pharisees to be able to observe. And so he brought these things together so that they would be able to come to the proper conclusion that Jesus must be God. Of course, do they conclude it? No. But by their own mouth, they're condemned. Just make a little note here. Okay, question 226, our last question here. Why would the people have fear because of what they had seen? It's based on Luke 5:26 and Mark 2:12. Okay, Luke 5:26 says, and they were all amazed, and they glorified God and were filled with fear, saying, we have seen strange things today. Mark 2:12 says, and immediately he arose, took up the bed, and went forth before them all, insomuch that they were all amazed and glorified God, saying, we never saw it on this fashion. So the answer is B. Their thinking was challenged by things not going the way they expected. Now, Matthew reported only how God was glorified. Mark added on this detail that they had never seen a healing performed in association with forgiveness of sin, but it's Luke who recorded that they were filled with fear because of it. This is one of the times when you realize that it's important to read all of the gospel accounts, because each one provides a little bit more detail than the one before. Well, B and C are wrong because people certainly do like miracles and would welcome them. People would, people want miracles all the time. Whenever they pray, they're looking for a miracle. The problem comes with people's expectations. People don't quite know how to deal with change. This is what I was referring to earlier, when Joe Dimley, when we were talking about this. People don't know how to deal with change. We want things to change for the better, but then we're faced with adapting to our new circumstances. Many times people want to just stay with the familiar. In fact, one thing that I found fascinating was that there are women who are abused, but do not leave the abusive spouse. By the way, it could be women or men, it's just typically women, will not leave an abused spouse because they've learned to live with the devil they know rather than the devil they don't know. It's more fearful leaving the situation because they don't know how they're going to manage. So they found ways to cope with and work around the devil they know. And so they'll stay with that which is familiar. This is a human trait. You ever have the feeling of nostalgia when you've gone someplace? That's going back to those familiar things that we have adapted to and that we like. When change takes place, people's sense of control is threatened because now they have to find new ways to deal with a new situation. If something's going to change, they at least want things to go the way that they expect them to happen. So people do not deal with change well, and that's something we should always, all of us, be aware of. I've described several, kind of more dire situations there, but we're the same way. Okay? Going on a diet. That's a fearful kind of thing. How am I going to adapt to that? I've got these eating patterns. Okay. I've got my set things I like. Going to new church, okay, can be a funny thing. I always find it interesting as people come in that are visiting for the first time and you can sort of see some people glancing around to get a lay of the land, to see, well, how do they do things here? I don't know, but Mohan, you might be the most recent one in our group here today to come in, but when you first ever came here, did you come like, okay, how's things done here?
Yeah, and also as far as biblical teaching, as far as expository or topical, and things of that sort.
You wondered what the preaching was going to be like. I'm repeating this because we don't have the microphone on you. Here, go ahead.
As far as like in-depth preaching, I was looking.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, and Mohan's got, a history of good churches that he's been in Bible education. So I was like, okay, well, what's going to happen here? Yeah. And then you sort of get to know people. Now, Alex, you're one of my more shy people. I'm not going to ask you a question to answer, but even at your age, you're still sort of adapting to the whole church life kind of thing. And it's getting used to, well, okay, what kind of things are expected and what to do. And so there's always a thing about change. Time change. Miss Nancy, how long has it been or how long was it before I changed that clock, my alarm clock by the bed? Last night I finally changed it, right? I do not like the time changes so much, okay? I don't like all of a sudden it's getting dark. Every other clock, my watch has changed, everything else has changed, but I'd like to wake up in the morning and to be able to say, well, it says that it's 7:30, but it's really only 6:30, okay? And so I should feel better. No, I'm sorry, it says, how does that work? If you fall back, okay, so if it says 7:30, I subtract an hour. And so I say, yeah, I'm really getting up early. I'm not sleeping late in reality. I'm actually getting up early. So we don't like to deal with the time change. We should know this about ourselves. Your system, your mental system is under stress with every bit of change in your life. And so most of it we take in stride because we're just used to being responsible. Let's put a microphone on Miss Nancy there. And so we should really work at it all the time. And then that way, if we're conscious of it and some big change takes place, you're more aware of what's happening to you. Ms. Nancy.
I think this also factors into why people resist the gospel.
Yes.
Because I think they can even tell it would require so much change. And one of the first things they'd have to admit is whatever belief system they had before is wrong.
Exactly.
And people are comfortable with whatever niche they've carved out. There's a classic example in the New Testament. It's found in a few of the Gospels, but Luke 8, where Christ finds the man sitting in a cemetery cutting himself, tortured. And he was so strong because of his demon possession that he was even able to break the chains that would bind him. And everybody around him accepted this and avoided him and was afraid of him. Well, long story short, Christ delivers him from demonic possession. The man gets saved. He's clothed in his right mind. And people are upset by this.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, look what Jesus did, revolutionized this man, healed him, cast demons out of him, we need more of this. They threw Jesus out of the city because the change was too much for them to absorb. They didn't want to reconcile what this meant about what their condition was. So they were more comfortable with the devil they knew.
Amen.
Literally, the devil they knew.
Literally the devil they knew. Yes. Okay. By the way, we don't have to just think about it in terms of false churches. You can find it inside of good churches with the people resisting change, as in, we never did it that way before. Traditions. Or, we've always done it this way. Okay. Adapting to the times. I got to say, I enjoy the kinds of times we can have with the kids. We just need people to be more responsible to bring kids in for the kids' days. We do need greater responsibility with that. But it feels a little strange to me still to this day. It's a little tiny bit less strange to me. Sunday mornings, I come in here and I'm like, la, 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 waiting for 10 o'clock. People start showing up for coffee and stuff, okay? Yeah, come on in early. Get the muffins even faster, Brother Alex. Come in at 10 o'clock. Yeah. Okay. But we change and we work with it. And some things that are bothersome to us, over time, we get a little bit more used to it, and we can begin to work with it. I still think I would like to change some things back to the old ways no matter what, where people are actually all around. Brother Joe.
Yeah, I just wanted to maybe add a little something to what Miss Nancy said about people resisting change. I think one of the things, especially like with belief systems, is that if you're going to adopt a new belief system, that means that everybody within your sphere of influence is wrong.
Yes.
You know, that means your parents were wrong. That means your priest or your minister or your imam is wrong. That's a lot to absorb, and I'm not justifying it, but I'm just saying that there's a lot going on there. And if you have parents who are deceased and you realize that they were wrong, that means that they're not where you think they are. You know, there's just, I mean, it's just a lot to take in all at the same time. And I think, you know, and of course that doesn't even include the ostracization that could take place. You know, that's a lot to process too. Nabil Qureshi talked about that a lot.
Yeah.
For those of us who may not know, Nabil Qureshi was a Muslim who eventually came to faith in Christ and became a very powerful speaker for Christ. But, you know, it wasn't just a matter of him changing his belief system. His whole life was going to be transformed, and most of it not in a good way. So the very fact that he embraced Christ, he was saying that he was saying what we should all be saying, is that Christ is worth more than anything else in the world, and he paid the price. Well, he didn't. He had difficulty with his family at the beginning. They reconciled later before he passed, and he had a pretty good relationship with his family. But that's not always the case for everybody. Some people will either be ostracized for the rest of their lives or face even worse consequences than that, even death, depending on what religion they're. Which one they're converting from. And, you know, former Muslims will tell you that they've encountered those kinds of things.
Amen. Amen. You know, you say being ostracized. I think that's a word that's fun to do a little word study on. It's not a biblical word, but ostracized comes from the word ostrakhan. And ostrakhan was a piece of broken pottery that you would write on. And what they would do in certain Greek city-states is they would have somebody that they wanted to get rid of, and they would take an ostrakhan, write on yes or no, and then they would cast a vote on the person to ostracize them, which would mean to cast them out of society. Okay? Does this sound like something in our most modern times here within these last few years? How about the cancel culture? Yeah. This is why we don't have a democracy, by the way. This is why we have a republic. Okay, because a democracy is mob rule. And so you would have in the pure democracies, where we might be thankful for the influence of the West and the influence of society by having votes that were taken, but it took a while to get it figured out how to control it properly so that you wouldn't have mob rule, because they would do that. They would literally ostracize somebody. They would cast their ostrakhan against that person and cancel them out. This is why, again, another reason against the collectivist mindset, because it would be mob rule. Before I call on Mohan and Tone, let me mention that I find it odd that people would want to revert to that kind of mentality, because America, I believe, is 75% white. Now, if all whites are naturally and just not able to help themselves, are just naturally racist, and then you give them the one man, one vote, and you have the majority rules, what they're really setting themselves up for then is to have the whites truly put down the other communities. If you want to talk about marginalization, make it a democracy. Okay, get rid of the electoral college if what you want to do is to enforce racism and create racism. Okay, but that's just all an exercise in stupidity. Brother Mohan and then Brother Tone.
There's an actual article that has, you have democracy, mobocracy, socialism, and Marxism/communism.
It's all the same thing.
Yeah, it's just like that timeline kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you were seeing, as far as conformity, even like, yeah, people were saying, "Ugh, you're not wearing a mask, you're not social distancing." And it's
Right.
the same thing as that quote cancel culture and
It's part of the
pointing
cancel culture.
people out.
Yes.
And it's like,
Yeah. Let me get Brother Tone. Nancy, I don't know whether you're musing on sharing some stuff about cancel culture that you were looking at recently. Okay, pass on that for now. Okay.
Well, before I give this to Brother Tone, I just wanted to say that pure democracy is two wolves and a lamb deciding what they're going to have for dinner.
There you go.
Yeah, our American system is unique. It's called constitutional republicanism.
Yeah.
It protects the minority. And it's only recently that minorities are beginning to realize that republicanism works best for them.
Well, I'm hoping they're getting it.
Well, they're getting a bigger size now of
Yes.
blacks and
Latinos.
Hispanics and even Asians are doing it now, and they consider the opposite, which is democratic, as being a mob rule.
Yeah.
It's only now that they're realizing it because under a mob rule, the minority view it's not relevant to them. It doesn't count. So we thank God that as a matter of ethnic minorities are given protection under that system.
Yeah. Yeah, the people don't realize it, but the constitutional republic that was established by the founding fathers is the pinnacle of civilization. Okay, it is the absolute highest form of civilization, and they do not appreciate the genius, the absolute genius that came together to form the United States government. Okay, Brother Joe, and then Brother Mohan.
Oh, I just wanted to say, just an afterthought to what Brother Tone was saying. In California, there was a group of Trump supporters, and among them were Vietnamese supporters who had fled communism and could see where things were going here. They had been there during the transformation of their country into a communist one, and they were speaking out against it because they could see, they can see where the left is going with this, and they are absolutely not wanting to go through that again.
Amen. Mohan. Yeah. Cubans, Venezuelans, Colombians. Yeah. Brother Mohan.
and as far as like even the founding fathers, they had, I think it was about Adams who said the Constitution was made for a religious Christian people.
Yes.
It's wholly inadequate for the governments of any other. And another founding father says that no form of government can contain or bridle the lust and passions and evil of men, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, we should capitalize that in the days yet to come, that this republic really is for a religious people, because a religious people will not vote in their own interest first. They will vote in the interest of others. And it's the reverse when you don't have it, when you have mob rule. They'll vote in their own interests rather than truly for the good of the whole, which is exactly what they say they're trying to do. Was there somebody else with Joe? No, nobody? Okay. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Brother Joe.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it's interesting that the Constitution is designed to protect minority rights, but people have been so manipulated today, particularly minorities, to champion their own untimely demise.
Yes. Yes. Okay, well, that is certainly some important information as we exercise applied theology. Okay.